So I saw that you're huge on why or the purpose or understanding your why. Can we start there? Because it almost seems like a buzzword. There's so many books. Simon Sinek has a book on why, right? So
Yeah,
it's definitely a popular topic.
yeah, definitely. And I suppose your why it changed through certain phases of my life. I was extremely fortunate to grow up in a lovely country of New Zealand and appreciate the outdoors, nature, enjoyed just getting outside, whether it's playing sport or hiking,
Is
being
that
on
where your
my
accent is
cousin's
from?
farm. Yeah. It's
Okay.
merged with Australia because I spent a lot of time in Australia too. So I'm sort of a hybrid model, if you so to speak. So I just grew up with deep appreciation of nature and the environment. And then as I began to get older, every New Zealander basically almost goes traveling because we're such a small country in the bottom of the world. We love to go traveling. I traveled through and most places you go to Europe, but it's quite expensive. But I spend a lot of time traveling around Asia as well. And you're just seeing the best and worst of humanity of what we've done to the place. Beaches full of rubbish, streets littered with plastic and stuff, and it just started to really irk me. So my why has always been to try. I got my first job, but it wasn't great. It was okay. It was in finance and technology and so forth. But I started to think, well, how can I do two things? How can I first have a good income, but do good? And try working. And I love business. I really like corporate. So why sort of evolved over the time of how can I find a role where I can actually be paid well, so I can live okay,
Right.
but do good right at the same time. And that's sort of where I sort of crafted my own career in sustainability. And it's almost my why is almost doubled down as I became a dad. You know,
Right.
14 years ago, I've got three young kids, and you just go, a big oh shit moment for me is when they're my age, what is the world going to look like? So almost needed to double down on my why and go, okay, I've really got to start making an impact. So yeah, that's sort of where I've sort of come from.
Yeah, I mean, going back to the beginning of your journey, even now that you mention it, it's interesting because as humans, we produce so much waste as a society. And I guess we don't think about it day to day in the US or first world countries because we create designated areas to just
Yeah.
dump.
Yes.
So when you go to third world countries or when I go to India or other places and I see rubbish or, just trash everywhere,
Yeah.
it's so interesting that like I don't know, we just don't take care of what we've been given.
Yeah. We've built this since post World War II, sort of a take, make, throw away
Yeah,
society, right?
right.
And I'm fortunate enough to do some work pro bono in the Pacific Islands, where I go to Tonga a lot, and you just see what's happened there. There's nothing they can do around recycling. It just goes into the hole, and on a small island, you're running out of place, of room
Yeah,
for that. So,
yeah.
so we've got to just do better with that, and that's sort of one of the key drivers that I see. But also, when you see all the pollution of fossil fuels and what's that happening to the climate and so forth, we've got a big challenge ahead of us, and I really think we need to move faster.
Now, you mentioned that your why can change over time. Taking a step back, what is your definition of purpose or your why?
Yeah,
what are you looking at?
yeah. So coming back to my purpose is to enable others to do good at the moment, especially now that I'm now out there consulting, coaching others to do learnt what I've done over the last 20 years in corporate sustainability roles. So my why is now to enable others. So I've got set myself a personal goal to try and support 1,000 new leaders in this field by 2030. And I know they will do good, and some are going to be far better than I ever been. So it's coaching and helping that to have that sort of, as you throw a stone in a pond, the ripple impact, how big can that go? How can those help others to do better? So that's where I see I can feel I can make the biggest impact.
Yeah. Do you think that maybe the definition of what we're looking for here is something related to a drive or in an inner fire that
Yeah,
gets you
yeah,
to do something even when times are tough?
yeah, totally. And it's because you have a greater purpose bigger than the company you're working for at times, and your boss, and you're bigger than your CEO or the board or whatever. it helps. It's definitely helped me in times when I'm going, what am I really doing here? What, no one gets this. What am I wasting my time? But then you look at the bigger picture and you go, yeah, this is meaningful. This is why I get up on a Monday morning when I don't really want to go to work. This is what drives me.
Right.
This is why I
Right.
have to go and have that awkward conversation in that meeting. That sort of helps you, definitely.
Do you ever work with people that are trying to create a collective why, as in like a
Yeah.
collective mission or trying to influence a group to want to do something together? Do you ever work with people that are struggling in that area?
Yeah, absolutely. I work in a small team, but we collaborate a lot with other people in my field. Get together for drinks, or sometimes cathartic conversations. We try to pat each other on
Right.
the back and pick yourself up and go back out there and encourage each other. But yeah, there's definitely a good here in Sydney and across New Zealand, Auckland, where I've worked as well, a good group of sustainability professionals who have been there well over a decade. We know each other very well. We've worked together, worked sometimes in competing, but always collaborating very, very well, which is very unique when you look at other industries. So there's a great sense of purpose when you get these people in a room. It's very invigorating, right? And we don't do it often enough because we definitely work in our silos and small teams and big businesses or small. Um, but when we get together, it's something I think it's hard to put my finger on. It's actually quite special. It's actually a really good group of people who you just want to spend more time with. You get your energy from, share ideas, pick each other up, and help. Yeah,
Yeah. How do you convince a group of people to believe in your why?
yeah. It's really hard. And
Yeah.
what I've found is that, say, the environmental movement, selling doom and gloom is not my thing, and fear is not the right way to create change. And I really hate that, and that's really irks me about a lot of these purist environmentalists to say you must do that, you must recycle, or you're gonna go to hell. All
Yeah.
that stuff.
Or
I
Earth
think,
ends by 2030.
yeah. What's the point? Why should you and don't have children? I prefer to paint a vision of what's possible, and what I do like to talk to when I talk to clients or have to say, what if we could do become still profitable, but what if you could actually do some good to society or environment at the same time? But what if doing that creates and open a new market or a new product or a new service that you never thought possible? What are your current business challenges today? And I think there's a sustainability angle to that. Can we explore that together? And that's a really cool conversation to have, workshops and stuff, and some sort of blue sky thinking. But it helps when you relate it to business. So they go, a lot of misconceptions I get is that if you want to do good, it's going to cost you money. Whereas I think when you look at the shared value of what the company's trying to do or business, there's generally a sustainability angle that might actually give you a competitive advantage. There's a lot of different examples around that I'm working with clients right now. So that's where I try and help show the why can come through, because everyone I work in business, no one wants to say no to more profit, right?
Right.
That's the main driver of business. So what if you could do that at the same time? And that's where you get some people, real light bulbs go off in people's heads going, oh, so my career isn't just about making money. It could actually help others or help society as a whole. So that's the key conversation you try to get to.
So, have you noticed, for example, when somebody has a strong internal why on their why they're doing something, let's say they're they're teaching somebody something or that they believe in, right? So they have this strong why they're doing it. Do you think that conviction is enough over time to get other people to believe in you, or does it take more than that? Is there something else to it?
Yeah, I used to think that was enough. And there have been personally times in my career where I've burnt out. Well, I've just taken on too much, where you actually take on all the problems of the world for that company and you say, I'm here to solve it. And that's just a wrong approach, because it's impossible to do that. You need to actually have people on your team to share the load, to take on everything, especially when you see sustainability teams in large companies might be just a handful of people trying to do so much. So you've got to empower the organization to do some of the heavy lifting as well, not just rely on you. That's important. And that's where the vision of the why becomes really important for you and that company to help get others on board to help you, because it's too much for one person or a small team even.
Is that where you learn to kind of delegate, or how did you approach that burnout?
Yeah, very badly early in my career, to say the truth.
Yeah.
You just, it was really bad. But frankly, the last time was actually just almost 2.5 years ago, um, which was really shocking for me because I thought I had a good handle on things. But for so many different reasons, I found myself just having to resign from my dream job, right? And then I was left going, oh my God, where did I go wrong? What did I do? So a lot of inward soul thinking. I spend a lot of time in nature, going for long walks on the beach. Go, what do I do with this? But there was that inner drive we spoke about earlier that sort of picked me up, and talking to others, family, friends, colleagues in industry said, I've still got something to give. And that was sort of where I knuckled down for almost 2 years to write the book that I've just published. So that was me getting over the burnout, but creating something good out of that. I had to
Right.
salvage something great. So
Right.
that was the key driver, and it was a really powerful driver. And it was my mates that got me over the line. Really, when you talk about your friends, I told them everyone I was writing a book. They kept me accountable to do it, and if I'd avoid them when we were out at drinks or something because he's going to ask me again. I haven't done
Yeah.
anything. Yeah, so they were really great. That was such a good, cool group of friends that I had at the time who just said, "How's that book going? Come on, you got this." It was
Yeah.
pretty amazing. Yeah,
It's also kind of the reason why I love, obviously, the right coach, but coaching,
yeah,
because that
absolutely.
accountability aspect, obviously the investment aspect, you've also given money.
Yeah, yeah,
Everybody
yeah.
values money. So both of those together, it's almost undeniable you'll hit whatever you just paid for, because
Yes, you paid for
you've,
it.
you paid
Yeah,
for it. You took the
yeah,
step. You took the step that most people wouldn't.
yeah. Exactly, exactly. And coaches are fantastic at certain stages. I've used many at the time, and for that reason too, right? You're
Yeah.
accountable. You're paying them. You need to really focus and knuckle down and get it done. Yeah,
Yeah. And I think the simplest example that most people can relate to is fitness, right? A
yeah,
trainer, a
yeah,
fitness coach. But what's interesting is the more you go into this space, there's coaches for so many different niches. It's so
yeah,
crazy.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I've talked to so many, even on this podcast, just various, from business, mindset, spirituality, everything,
yeah,
literally
yeah,
everything.
yeah.
And is that when you made the shift after writing your book that you wanted to do more coaching and helping?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's so good. And the book's only been out there a couple of months, but I just had a call last Friday with a sustainability professional. He's the only person in this large organization. And I know if things don't change for him in the next 12 months, he's going to be like I was 2.5 years ago. He's going to burn out. So he's got my book and he said, Lee, how can I, you know, get the organization to move along? And he's got more things piling onto him, like more legislation that he has to deal with. And I said, look, you've got to actually become the collaborator, not the annoyer of the business, trying to ask people to do things. You've got to get them to start doing the heavy lifting. And you need a real governance model that has ownership across different sectors of your sustainability strategy that other executives need to be accountable for and present on. That you just got to start shedding the load. Otherwise, the worst thing that happens to that poor guy is that he just gets burnt out and doesn't and leaves sustainability altogether. Has to get another job, just doing something else, which is a total waste of it. Where we need more people in there, and they need,
Yeah.
need to be more effective. So that sort of really highlighted to me the power of having a book out there, but the power of being able to offer something more than just the book. Like I'm thinking about coaching calls, or I've got a worksheet now that is going to accompany the book that's coming out soon. So someone goes through the step by steps. They've got a worksheet. I've got some videos on YouTube coming out, how to stuff. So I'm just thinking, how do I get the one to many as fast and as effective as possible?
Yeah. I love that idea, because I think people think about leadership in the wrong way, because it's not so much about the sense of power, it's about the sense of collaboration. How can you get
Yeah,
a group of people to do something?
yeah,
And often we think just pointing and telling people to do something is effective. And depending on what you're talking about, maybe, but like the most effective is what you said, kind of getting in there, right? Collaborating. So what kind of caught my attention was when you mentioned this idea of kind of starting something and asking them to collaborate instead of being like, do this, do that, do this.
Yeah.
It's almost getting the engine started with them.
Yeah, correct. And that's where I think a lot of people make the mistake of that command control structure. I know best, you do this. And it works for a while, military or whatever, I understand. But long term, it's not a viable solution. You need to empower others to actually do the work. You work closely with them, but it's their strategy, it's their project. You're the coach. You're sitting in the back seat almost. You don't need to be the guy talking in the room. The best meetings I've been now, where I've been coaching a team, they run a sustainability meeting. I'm not even speaking. It's so good now. They're up to
That
speed, and
sounds
they won't
awesome.
need me. They won't need me soon. They need me for some special
Mm-hmm.
project, but they're all now just got it. They've got the cadence. They're doing great stuff. So I'll just sit back and I'm so proud. It's like I feel like my children have grown up, they're
Yeah,
now
yeah.
doing stuff. So that's the real ultimate thing. And that's what I think true leadership is actually being in the room and not having to do much because you've
Yeah.
empowered and everyone else in the room knows what they're doing. They're focused, they're empowered, they're knowledgeable, they have the confidence to lead themselves. So yeah.
Mhm. That idea, I came across that idea once listening to, I think it was Russell Branson uh,
Yeah.
on YouTube. He's like a
Yeah.
billionaire, and he was talking about the
Yeah.
ultimate goal of business is to get to the point where you don't even have to be there.
Yeah. Yeah. You're
And
not
I
needed.
thought,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And when I
Yeah.
heard that, I thought, wow, that's so true, because that's truly how they,
Yeah.
people at such statures leverage their time is
Yeah.
they've created such a system that's automated without their presence.
Yeah. 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 That's what I'd love to try to get to with my business one day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is the hardest part of that picking the right people?
Absolutely. It's so key. Anyone who's managed a team, you know when it's not going well and you got one rotten apple, it just takes up all your time and it's draining and it's really really hard. So yeah, I do sort of have this mentality of hire slowly, fire quickly, sort of thing. And most of the time, I look back, your gut feel is pretty much 90% right. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I say that all the time on the show too. When I reflect on stories, I'm like, even when I think about going
yeah,
against my gut, usually I pay the
yeah,
price.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. It's funny you say that because I was literally just about to ask if you believe in hiring slow, firing fast, or hiring fast, firing slow. And which, like, why and which one?
yeah. I definitely hiring slow is really critical for me. I understand why you might need to hire fast, but you'd probably I would try and do that on a contract or a project if you needed something quickly. If you're looking at like a business partner or someone senior, you've got to know the person quite well. You've got to see how they work under pressure. Are they going to step up? All that sort of type of stuff. Or what I've done previous roles, you're lucky enough you get a graduate. They come in rotation of summer holidays, so you get to check them out, right? And you know pretty quickly whether they're going to last, and you can sort of go, okay, you can come in the team next year on these sort of criteria and stuff. We'll have you, or you're probably not a good fit for us, type
Mm-hmm.
thing. So yeah, definitely the opportunity to try and test people out is key, and then yeah, definitely. And then if you've made that mistake, you do give them a chance. Obviously, try. Sometimes you sit down and say, hey, I don't think your performance is up to scratch. You need to work on these areas. Definitely, by all means, give them the right opportunity to step up. But if they can't, you know true well that hey, it's not a good fit, and that person's probably better off somewhere else too. You're probably not doing them a service by keeping them on when they're not quite right for the role. Yeah,
I've definitely been in that position when I've hired editors in the past, and one editor just, I could tell, just
yeah,
wasn't there for,
yeah,
they didn't enjoy it. They didn't enjoy
yeah,
it.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I realized, not only is it, penalizing me and my workflow and productivity, but also if you don't even, you're probably better off somewhere else if you don't enjoy it
correct.
either.
Yeah.
So it's just a win-win technically, right?
Yes, yeah, yeah, and it's an awkward conversation to have, but geez, you just and then you think, oh, in 2 weeks' time, you look back, oh, so glad I did that. What was I, and that
Yeah.
person's gone through the grief cycle and has now found something good, or just, you know,
Yeah.
it's better off for everyone. Yeah.
I can tell when I've made the right decision on a big decision if I feel a sense of relief after it's over.
Yes. Yeah. That's a
If
good
I feel this
barometer, isn't it?
weight just
Yeah.
disappear, I'm like, okay, I definitely made the right choice.
Yeah. 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 No, I
Have you
agree.
ever felt that experience and made the wrong choice? Do you ever recall?
Yeah. Oh, many, 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 and kept this, a couple of people on, and it just disrupted the whole team. And I tried, and you keep on trying, and it just drains you. And then you just look back and go, look, I went through, 3, 4 months of pain, and it still didn't work out. And you knew 4 months ago you needed just to rip the band-aid off and get on with it. So it's especially hard in a small business, really critical, because everyone needs to be rowing in the right direction, pulling their weight. And then when someone's not doing that, you're spending more time on that person, you're taking your eye off the main game, and it just, it's not a cool feeling.
Yeah, it's especially if it's a new feeling, it's
Yeah,
uncomfortable
yeah,
always, but when
yeah,
it's new, it's very difficult to try having that conversation.
yeah.
I wanted to ask you, Lee, you know, you've coached clients, you work with people on their purpose and helping business owners and whatnot. What is something so far in either your coaching or being a podcast guest that a topic or idea you've wanted to talk about that you just haven't had a chance to, that you
Oh,
believe is important?
yeah, the key thing, and I asked this question in my book, and I do want to ask it for your listeners. And when you're working in a business, and I ask this to boards and execs when I'm working with them as well, ask yourself the simple question: if your business did not exist today, would the world, society, or environment be better or worse off? And when you do that reflection and inward thinking, the answer will quite surprise you. And I often get a lot of silence, but I hold that silence. And I know your readers are now thinking about this, listeners. The answer is probably your opportunity of your why and the purpose of your business. And it could be your threat at the same time, or your weakness. So that's a really cool question that, just ask yourself that, and then write down the 3 or 4 key things that come to mind, and then go down a bit deeper. So some execs, you say, yeah, the planet would be worse off, and go, well, why would it be worse off? Because someone would come in and wouldn't care as much. Okay, well, why do you care as much more than someone else? And what is that? That I use that almost in many cases forms a foundation for your sustainability strategy and what you should be worth focusing on when you look at that. So that's a good one.
So what about someone who's in the pursuit of making an impact, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Doesn't that question then become a little difficult because you're trying to make it better
yep,
off with
yep,
you in it, but
yep,
you're
yep.
still working towards it?
Yeah, yeah. So if it's all the negative stuff, you can actually run an action plan to how do you make it a positive,
Hmm.
or and so forth. So you might say, we pollute a lot because we use a lot of fossil fuels. Someone else will come in and use renewable energy. Well, why aren't you using renewable energy now? What's your problem?
Right.
What can you work towards that? That's just a very simple thing. Or you might say, someone else will come. We're a manufacturer. Someone else will come in and build with more sustainable materials. Okay, why aren't you doing that now? What's your opportunity there? So yeah, that's a very simple task that you can find some really good opportunities.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great question. I think some of the best insights you get is when you ask those types of very
Yeah,
uncomfortable questions.
and you gotta be comfortable being uncomfortable, because that's where you grow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I've noticed, especially as a defense mechanism, our egos tend to soften the blow. So
yeah,
we'll make an excuse, but it's not quite the deepest reason. So
yeah,
I found that the practice of asking why over and over and over again till it distills down to some
yeah,
simpler meaning. Is that
yeah,
what you also tell people through that
yeah,
exercise?
yeah, exactly. Just distill it right down to, why does your business exist? To make money. You know, what else? You know, what
Like,
else
why
does it
not
do?
a business
Yeah,
somewhere else
yeah,
if it's just
yeah,
money? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. What else is there? Is it just about money? And your people are catching on to this too. I think there's an interesting stat from I think Deloitte where 80% of surveyed staff want to work for a company that's got a purpose beyond profit. You know, so if you want to attract and retain talent, you've got to have a decent, a why other than making money.
I worked a few years in corporate software engineering, and I would always hear people, and I was the same way, but I would always hear people also say that they just felt like their work was meaningless. They would
Yeah.
just clock in,
Mm-hmm.
fix some code or whatever, and then clock out. And
Yeah.
in the grand scheme of things, they don't see any change. Nothing is different. All they
Yeah.
see is a paycheck, and they just keep doing it. And I think you're right. Now we're seeing that it's like, okay, well, if you want me to work for 40 years
Yeah.
with no purpose is kind of
Yeah.
just an exhausting ask.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think more and more people do you think we're shifting as a mindset, as an economy to more independent work or at least purpose driven work?
Yeah. I do think what I've seen in this corner of the world, the rise of the conscious consumer and products you buy and what you do, and that's reflecting into where you work as well and what your purpose is at your job and what the purposes of your company. What are the type of leaders in that company are definitely a large consideration, especially in more, I suppose, knowledge, higher paid roles. People are looking at that type of thing, as well as I'm seeing as sort of factory floor workers too. I've been in some of those places. They've been asking, very interested in the work I've been doing with the company as well. I want to understand a bit more about it. They're picking up on things around, especially the waste is so visible. They see it in their and climate change. The other one, modern slavery. What's your supply chain? Go around the world. And as we've got more digital, more transparency comes in play. There's a lot of things that could easily, quickly blow up for a company if they don't have the right structures or procedures in place as well.
Yeah, that's just such a difficult topic to tackle because it's run on profits, and you would have to fundamentally change the game to change people's mindset on the rules, right? Because or at least or I guess create very strong rules in place. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. There's definitely an opportunity, first of all, to understand your impacts, what you're doing as a business, address those, and some of it might be a long-term play, like a decade, 20 years out. But you want to be moving towards the right direction of, say, zero emissions or zero waste or no modern slavery in our supply chain, working with your suppliers and start. You need to start doing something, but also you got to have that forward-thinking vision and a target, I suppose, by 2030 you want to halve the emissions or something like that, but be very transparent around that and do that. And then where the business side comes in, profit comes in, what I'm seeing now is all the large companies are doing this and putting pressure on their supply chains. So I'm working now with a large company, three large companies right now. We're asking questions of their suppliers about what's the carbon emissions of your product, what's the waste of it, can you guarantee there's no modern slavery in your supply chain? All these questions are filtering down. So, and I know in maybe 3 or 4 years' time, they might need to make some calls to drop some suppliers that don't meet these criteria because they've set a target that all their suppliers need to actually adhere to. And if they're not going to do it, you're going to miss your target, which means you're going to be publicly shamed. You're going to have a sort of a drop in reputation. So you can see how the sort of ecosystem is growing around to sort of everyone needs to get on board, even the small, mums and dads sheds supplying a listed entity or something like that. You can see how that's sort of growing. And then those that are smart click on to say, okay, this is not just a tree hugging exercise, right? This is critical to my business. I want to keep winning. I want to keep still supplying these types of products to these types of customers who pay a premium for that service. They're going to want to have to, we're going to have to do some stuff internally as well. So,
And when does a business owner tend to make that shift from me to bigger impact? because small businesses are focused
Yeah,
on keeping afloat and
absolutely.
making money,
Yeah,
right? So when
yeah,
does that shift you tend to happen?
yeah. It like just a notification from a large supplier, a main
Mm,
supplier. So there's one. I mean, there's one client who's a manufacturer of industrial kitchen materials, and McDonald's have asked them, "Where's your sustainability strategy, carbon emissions, and so forth?" You know, family-owned business, key supplier McDonald's is now asking them they need to start doing stuff. You know, so the other one would be sort of businesses. Another one that's come up is a business trying to track finance, have been told by their bank, you need to, if you want to retain, you know, we want to see cost of capital is going to go up for you if you do not have a sustainability strategy and target, because they've now set a target on financed emissions across their portfolio, and you're now deemed a risk because you're a, you know, you're a large emitter and polluter of what you do. So these are all starting to filter down.
so let's say McDonald's claims they're carbon emission neutral. Does that mean every vendor they work with is also
Yeah, there's a
in
quick,
that?
maybe I'll give you a short sort of quick lesson on carbon accounting. I'll try not to get too technical very quick, but how they do with, how they measure emissions, they call it scope, and scope 1, 2, and 3. So very simple. Scope 1 emissions would be the gasoline in your car. That's burning. You're burning a fossil fuel. If you have a fireplace at home, you put coal on it, or you gas and cooking and stuff. That's called scope 1. Okay, relatively easy to manage. You know, number of liters of fuel or gallons and so forth, and you know, gigajoules of gas. Each has a emission factor, so that's how you measure that. Scope 2 is electricity from your grid. So it will have a emission factor per every kilowatt you use. So, say for instance, if you're in maybe California, you got lots of renewable wind and solar. It's less if you're maybe in, sorry, I'm just taking up, maybe in Texas, you've got coal-fired power stations. So there's a little factor of emissions, amount of kilograms of CO2 per kilowatt used. Scope 3 is where we get to your question, which is really interesting. That is emissions up and down your supply chain. So you do not have direct control over this. But imagine if you go on a plane, your flights. The fuel used by the airline is their scope 1, but it's your scope 3 emissions. Um, if you buy a product, say for instance, the headsets we're wearing, there is a emission factor for that sort of model or make or whatever, or that product, and so forth. The waste that goes to landfill degrades over time, releases methane. There's all these, so many different calculations, really hard to do. But coming back to your case around McDonald's, I think they've set it like a science-based target, right? So that means they're trying to get to at least 50% reduction by 2030 and hopefully net zero by 2050 across all scopes. One and
Okay.
two, I'm sure they've got a good handle on. Three is where that question's come up against that supplier, because they know they've got to reduce those emissions. So they've got to engage their supply chain. That's where you see the flow on impacts of that. So do you want to be a supplier of choice to McDonald's, and you're looking at these contracts? So you head of procurement and you've got a target of to get to zero emissions. You're going to go with the supplier. They might be the same on price. So you might look at the supplier. Okay, this supplier's got a climate target in line with science and it's verified. This one says they don't want to get one. Who are you going to go for? I need to reduce
Right.
my emissions. You're going to start making that choice towards the most sustainable supplier. If all other factors are the same, of course, you know, but it's going to
Gotcha.
be, yeah,
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 it's like a trickle down pressure from the
trickle
top.
down effect. And
Yeah.
what I'm going to see, it's going to be like procurement is a huge lever for change. Obviously, it's going to be, you're not even going to be considered in future if you don't have one. You're not even going to be asked to join. You don't have a ticket to the dance, sort of thing per se.
Mm, wow.
That's the future where that's going to look at. So, and that's where McDonald's wants to get to, have all their suppliers with science based, you know, and have
Hmm.
robust sustainability plans.
Pretty interesting because I just saw on Apple's website the other day them claiming they were, I think, carbon emission neutral or something
Yep,
like that.
yep, yep, yep,
Well, Lee, I always like to ask my guests this one closing question on the show. And as you know, the show is called Learn or Be Learned. So, what is one life lesson that either you learned from your life or you learn from someone else that you want to share today?
Yeah, I suppose it's from my own learnings is that when things look really bad, it's there's always another day. Don't take it too seriously at times. Chat with friends, have a laugh, go for a walk. Um, things might be really bad at times of your career, but time and space is actually a really good healer.
Yeah, I think that beautifully summarizes your why because it's at the end of the day, everything vanishes, right? So truly what is important? Is it the extra hour of stress you put in your career or maybe some time with friends or family or
Yeah,
loved ones, right?
yep, absolutely.